I am the famous American. Let's talk about Canada. Now, multiple times here on this channel, I have half-jokingly referred to Canada as the 51st state. That's just how we tend to look at Canada here in the United States. We like Canada. We have no problem with Canada. Canada's great. But in our minds, Canada isn't different enough compared to some of our other states here in the United States. For example, the obvious one is California. If anything was going to be its own country, it'd be California, more so than Canada. Now, I get it. Canada has this perfect healthcare system and everybody's happy with all that. So they're doing that. That's definitely exclusive to them as compared to the United States. I get it. They don't have the same government as us. But when you look at Canada culturally, and you look at the genetic makeup of Canada, I am saying Canada as a nation is more similar to most of the United States here in our country, more so than California. California is like its own country. Now, I could easily say the same thing about Texas. When I think of Texas, I think of the state that in its own mind, it is its own country. It might as well be, as far as I'm concerned. But that's more of a mindset. The way Texas functions, it's still more like the rest of us. That's funny, I didn't even realize. I just happened to be wearing a California t-shirt as I'm making this video. Complete coincidence. But California might as well be its own country. My wife is from there. She's from the state capital, Sacramento. I have been there many times throughout this whole entire state of California. From the very top, Mount Shasta. I just happen to have a shirt for that too. That's funny. I just got it. You'll be seeing that in the future. So all the way from Mount Shasta, all the way to San Diego. And yeah, I'm convinced it's its own country. Not simply just the landscape, but the laws. It's funny because most people from California that I've spoken with, about their state, they say, this place is crazy. We've got so many crazy laws. And where I live in Tennessee, so many people come to Tennessee from California. One of the reasons is because the cost of living is so much lower, and yet you still get a great experience as far as life goes. You don't really have to sacrifice much. If anything, everything's actually better out here as far as how your enjoyment of living happens to be out here in comparison. People are escaping from California, coming to Tennessee, as if we're some exotic state. We are a beautiful rolling hills kind of state. It is a great state, but you think, well, why wouldn't anyone want to be in California? Well, ultimately, it's a large state, but demographically, it's so different. You've got Los Angeles, that's its own thing. Then you go upstate, like where my wife's from, the state capital, things are much more conservative and more rural and more farming and all these things. And then, of course, way up north, the medical marijuana farms and all that going on. So there's just so many different things for this state. It's been mentioned it might as well be its own 3 states, if anything. But I still feel that in some ways they lead the country in certain policies that are good. But often they're so caught up in their own policies that it can hold them back as a whole. It's just such a big state that it almost trips over itself. And then they make these laws to try to regulate things which can help certain parts of the state but not the other. So it's a bit of a mess. And I feel like people from California know that. When I travel to California, people who currently live there say that. And when I tell them about Tennessee, they're like, wow, it actually is good for business. They actually want people to come out there. They give them incentives to live there. There's so much less taxes out there. Yeah, it seems like quite a draw for people to come from California to Tennessee, where I am. So with all that being said, to me, California stands out more from the rest of the states as its own thing, more so than Canada. Canada is like the easiest roommate ever. What's not to like about Canada? They're very peaceful. They think much like us. Now, granted, I understand that we'd be like the redneck. Like in terms of nations, the United States is, if we had an avatar, it'd be wearing a cowboy hat, right? In Canada, not so much. They're more polite, reserved, more like more like England, even though if anybody is a buddy to our nation here in the USA, it definitely would be England. They seem to really like us, as does the Philippines. So there are certain nations that do like us. A lot of them don't. They're like, hey, USA, get over yourself. Why are you always trying to police the world? You know, and that's its own video that I mention from time to time. But I think this is an interesting topic, and I would actually be very interested in discussing it further. So let's talk more about this. Can anybody agree with me that in theory, California is more foreign in compared to the other 49 states? And in theory, we might as well count Canada as the 51st state because they're more like us as far as resembling a U.S. state. It just feels like Canada is one of us, and it feels like California is not only a different country, but it feels like it's its own planet. What do you have to say? I am listening for your wisdom.